Hello everyone, my name is Sabine Boghossian, and on this new episode of The Outline, we're going to be hosting Lizzy Vartanian. Lizzy is an embroidery artist based in London. Much of her work is inspired by roots in Lebanon, Armenia and Syria, transforming 20th century family photographs into embroidered works of art. Her work has been exhibited at the Royal Academy of Art and featured on Grayson Perry's Art Club. Lizzy was a founding member of the London-based Tatreez collective, and she's also an active member of the afikra community. Lizzy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for being here. Now, I'm very curious to know more about that flight from London to Sydney, because I don't think I've ever seen any kids embroider anything on a flight before. So can you tell us maybe more about it?
It's probably one of my earliest memories. Firstly, because it was the first time I went to Australia. And my family is Armenian, Lebanese, and they all left Beirut to move to Sydney. And my mum only came to London because she married my dad. So it was like the time going to like meet my grandma and my cousins and everyone for the first time. And I just remember my mom, like, she's really perfectionist, right? And like, I think it's a Middle Eastern thing where like, if something's not going right, like she'll let you know about it.
Right.
And I know like, British mums are not like that. They'll be like, oh, darling, that's okay. Obviously I was 5 years old and it was dark and we were like the only people awake, you know, when it's like nighttime on the flight and you turn the lights on. And she was like teaching me how to cross stitch this teddy bear, which I still have. But it wasn't one of my earliest memories, but I kept going. So I guess like I wanted to prove to her that I could do it.
As someone who, as you're saying, has grown up in diaspora, what kind of role do you think Tatreez actually played in your relationship to your roots?
Like honestly, at the beginning, I don't think it did play much, like have much relationship to my roots, only because like the style of embroidery that my mom does isn't so much like related to the region. It's more like westernized, and I mean, she lived in Australia since she was like a teenager, so she also has like a very like Western influence on like fashion and things. I don't think it was until I got older and was like more interested in finding out about the region, and I got to know about brands like Sarah's Bag and other things like that. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. Like, why aren't I doing things like that?
So you kind of got inspired by other, let's say, brands or creatives doing something that is inspired by the region, but in a more modern way or like in a different way, let's say. Okay.
Yeah, like I don't really like super traditional stuff. Like I appreciate it, but I don't think I would ever make it. It's not my style. Like I'm from a new generation and I love that people are like continuing to like keep these crafts alive. But I also think that it's okay to bring it into the 21st century. Like we're not our grandmothers and that's okay.
Right. Because the embroidered portraits, I think it's actually the first time I've seen portraits in form of an embroidery.
Yeah, for sure. Like really not what my mom does at all. And I think for me, like these are old pictures of like my grandparents when they were young. So obviously I didn't know them then. And my relationship with them was always, like I said, they were in Sydney. So it was a massive like physical distance. So it's almost like stitching them like into the present and also like putting color into these portraits because they're all black and white. So I'm kind of like imagining like what they would look like, and then I show my mom and she'll be like, no, grandma never wore pink. But I'm like, it's okay because she does now, so it's fine.
I decided that she will wear pink on my embroidery. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, I've read on your website that you spent a considerable amount of time with female practitioners in Jordan and that you learned, different traditional stitches from the Levant.
Yeah.
Can you tell us maybe more about the local differences and variants of Tatreez, and also the way you decided to kind of reinterpret Tatreez in your own style?
Yeah, so I was in Jordan for something on Tatreez related. So I used to like have an art blog and I used to write about art and curate exhibitions and things. So I was on a curatorial residency at Dar el Fanoon, and then basically I always embroider, like ever since that plane journey. If I'm in a taxi, on a train, anything like it's like my comfort blanket. I always have it with me.
Mhm.
And people are like, oh my God, you do Tatreez, you need to meet this person, you need to meet that person. And it kind of happened organically. And like, since people know that I love to do this, like they took me to like meet different women and like different villages and things. And that's when I learned all about Palestinian embroidery, Jordanian embroidery, Syrian embroidery. So they all kind of taught me different stitches, which was really nice. And I'm the kind of person that like, if I meet someone and they tell me that I need to keep doing this or I need to do this, and like, I will do it and I will show it and I will go back and like show them that, yes, I have carried on this pillow that we started together. Or yeah, it's like almost like also like a way to communicate with different people.
Right. So you do consider Tatreez as a form of expression.
Yeah, 100%. Because like, it's like non-verbal, but say like I showed a portrait of my grandma like to someone in London and someone in Australia or Armenia or Lebanon, like we don't need to talk about it, but they can see that it's a picture of a woman like in a pink dress, say, or like for instance, like Palestinian embroidery, like different styles and colors and things relate to different villages and different times. Like the threads that people use like relates to like dyes and natural vegetation, like in the area that they come from. So I think more so with historical embroidery, because resources like really were limited to like where you are, whereas now we can just order anything on the internet, right? But I think like in the past, like it really was like a way of communication.
It's basically the same with carpets. I guess it's this very intrinsic relationship to where you are and the context in which you're working. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
As you know, Outline is all about processes. Can you maybe walk us through your creative process? Like, how does an embroidery come to being?
That's a good question. Because I normally work on like a few projects at once. Like a lot of it is on impulse. Like I'm quite impulsive, even though it's obviously not like a very impulsive art form. Like it can take weeks and months to make something. But if I like talk about like the family photographs, for instance, like I go through my mom's albums like all the time. I think I'm the most annoying daughter ever because I'm always like taking everything out and like messing with them and putting them back. But yeah, like I'm always looking at pictures, and then if I decide that I want to embroider one, like a lot of the old photos from Aleppo and Beirut, like physically in size, they're not very big. They're like probably like half the size of a postcard. I don't know much about photography, but I think at that time photos were just smaller, or maybe they were the cheaper ones. I don't know. Then normally I would take a picture on my phone and put it on my laptop and enlarge it, just because it's easier to copy then. And because like the smaller the embroidery is, the harder it is to stitch. So I don't like to make them too big, but also if they're like half a postcard size, it's not really possible. So then I would sketch it out. Normally I would sketch it a few times because I want the outline to be like really like a hard outline, so it's easier to transfer onto fabric. And then I used to copy it on the window with the light, but I recently upgraded to a light box. So I normally work on either calico or furnishing fabric, like furnishing linen, just because it's like heavier and more durable, and I don't like the really thin linen for embroidery. So then I sketch that on, and then I just stitch it. And normally like the colors are impulsive, like I don't plan them in advance. It's like what I'm feeling like at the time.
You said it starts with sketching. It's interesting because then it becomes kind of, this layered work of, okay, you draw something and then you start imagining it in the material and with the threads.
Yeah, and it does change like when you sew it, because like a pencil is not the same as fabric. And sometimes even when you're drawing on fabric, like the grain of the fabric will change it a little bit. So the initial sketch, like it is similar, but it's not the same. And you can feel the fabric change as you work on it. It gets softer and like you become like more emotionally involved. Like I've cried over it if I make a mistake. Like it's very emotional for me because it can take a long time.
Of course. Well, speaking of time, earlier you were mentioning that whenever you have a trip on a train, on a plane, or whatever, basically you have some waiting time, you start to embroider. It's become kind of your companion for these, spaces where you can't do much basically other than wait. I'm interested to know what you think of like how is embroidery going to evolve in a time where we are being less and less patient and we're having, we kind of need to be constantly stimulated and we're not spending enough time investing into something that we can do.
I just from personal experience, I am always attached to my phone. And I actually like have my embroidery with me, like on the train or on the tube, because it means I put the phone down.
Right. That's a very good, actually, kind of alternative for the phone, I suppose.
Yeah. And even like the other day, I was like to her, oh my God, I'm so impatient. She's like, no, you're not impatient. You do embroidery. But yeah, it is like, even I find reading hard now. It's so bad. But embroidery, for some reason, I stick with it. Because I think with embroidery, you see the progress, you like every day there's like a little bit more and you're like, you start this picture and this picture starts forming, like, I want to finish this. So there is like a sense of accomplishment, like when you're creating something.
I can see behind you, there's a little library.
Yeah. I'm always buying new thread. And like looking the cost of inflation by how much threads have gone up. It's a lot in the last few years.
That's your cost reference.
Yeah.
I'm curious also to know. So when you embroider, let's say any piece, do you try to also make something like an object out of them, or is it always do you always want them to be framed, or do you try to, I don't know, upholster, let's say, furniture with them, or what kind of use do you make of your embroidered pieces?
So some of them are to be frames. I've done a lot of homeware, so I've done a lot of tablecloths, table runners, napkins, like placemats. Like I'm a very home person. Like I'm a real homebody. So like I think that says a lot about me. And at one point I was making a lot of cushions. And I also did a few like bags, like book clutch bags. And I do think I really want to do a chair. However, I don't want anyone to sit on my embroidery.
Yes,
I don't want anyone sitting on that.
I totally understand that. We used to have an embroidered chair, at home, and which was embroidered by my grandmother, and we weren't allowed to sit on it. So,
to be honest, like my table, I spent a year and a half making a tablecloth, and I have used it for like 5 minutes, like to take a photo or something. And then straight away, it's like going out because it's too precious.
Yeah, no one is allowed to eat on that tablecloth. That's for sure.
Yeah, like it's just for a quick photo. Like, yeah, I wish I wasn't afraid, but when you like spend that much time on something and you have messy people around, yeah.
What do you do when you're looking for inspiration? Basically, like where do you go, or what do you start, looking at?
I mean, I look in my family photo albums, and I guess I look in like Tatreez books. I mean, I've done a few things recently, like inspired by like Armenian traditions. So like I look on like Instagram for like traditional embroidery and like Pinterest and things. I do have like a folder on my laptop that's like Tatreez inspo. But to be honest, most of what I make like is made on impulse. I don't really think things through too much in advance. Like I wish I said I did. I just
But it is also a kind of process, to decide that what you feel is basically what you will embroider at the very specific moment that you start the work.
Yeah, like there was a piece I made last year, like a picture of my mom and my great-grandfather in harissa, and I had sketched that like years ago. And when I first sketched it, I didn't think it would work. But then I do keep all my drawings, and I went back to it and I thought, oh no, I think I know how to do this now. So like I do go back to things, and yeah, like sometimes I do sketch it and I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. Like you just know, right? I don't know, like you have a feeling that for some reason, like this will be too hard or this won't look quite right. In that particular picture, they were standing in front of a railing and there were like some gaps in the rail, and I had to figure out like what I was going to put in those gaps, if I were going to put their clothes or if it was just going to be like a block color. So I think like over time, like little things like that, you kind of understand and develop like how you would approach it.
Right. And how does your mom feel about your embroidery now as the perfectionist that she is?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like she is she's very honest. I think she likes it, but if like something is like a little bit off, like she
Mhm.
will say, which is a
Okay.
bit annoying. But for the most part, recently she's quite like things. So yeah. To be honest, I don't tell her I'm doing it until like midway through because I know that like her ideas are gonna like put me off. But yeah, like at the minute I'm doing a portrait of her reading comics in Beirut when she's like 5.
Okay.
And I know like the colors that in the thing are completely wrong, but she's okay with it. Like I've spoken to her about it and she's fine. Well, we're moving up.
She's, I guess, one of your most difficult judges.
Honestly, she really is.
But that's also kind of precious to know that you will always have unfiltered feedback from her.
Yeah, because I feel like your friends and like people around you, they'd always say that they like it, even if it's rubbish.
Right.
But she would tell me how it is, and I do respect her for that, even if sometimes it's a little bit annoying.
Are there any projects or exhibitions you're currently working on?
I'm working on 2 things, so I often work on a couple of things at once. For 2 reasons. One, not everything is portable, and I need to have something with me when I'm traveling. So I'm doing, as I said, the portrait of my mom reading comics in Beirut, which I want to finish by May because that's her birthday. And that one is like my travel project because it's like possible. So I don't really work on that one at home. And then I'm also working on a massive portrait of me it's a picture of me in Amman like last September. A friend of mine runs this space called Jordan Craft Center, and it basically celebrates Palestinian and Jordanian crafts. And he always asked me to model his clothes for him on Instagram, which can be a bit annoying, but it is really like nice. And it's basically me wearing this blue coat, and it has this Jordanian stitch called Man, which is from near Petra. So it's like in my like trademark like satin stitch style, and then the actual Jordanian motifs are in that stitch. And then she's holding this bag, which is another stitch from the north of Jordan, which I'm going to try and do that bit in that stitch. So this is a really big one. It's like over a meter high, and like the big projects give me anxiety. I don't know why. They just seem more, I don't know, delicate to me. Like I would never travel with them, and it's probably like my most ambitious project in a long time. But I'm excited to see how it'll turn out. Like I think I'm 70% done, so we'll see how that goes. No, I'm a very emotional person, so like it is like an extension of me, I would say. Like it is like such an emotional art form because it's so physical, which I don't think people appreciate. Like people, some people can't do it when they're older, and like you're like, I get cramps sometimes, like I'll admit it. Like there are times where I have to take time off. Yeah, that's just the nature of it, I guess.
Yes, because it's also probably this repetition in the embroidery act that kind of brings you to contemplate and to think about probably like a lot of things be in your head, and then this
Yeah.
is probably what gives it also this emotional kind of dimension.
Yeah, probably. Like I'm a really anxious person, so maybe that's like it is like almost like a comfort blanket to me. Like at this point, like I always have it, and not always, but most of the time, like unless I'm carrying a stupidly small bag, I always have it with me.
Right.
And sometimes if I'm not working on something, like, oh my God, like what do I do with myself now? Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, it can be. I can imagine it as a really kind of an emotional outlet. So Yeah, you kind of have a not necessarily dependency, but it can be really comforting to have that.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely think I have like quite an addictive personality. So like once I start, it's really hard for me to stop. Like I have to tell myself like, okay, Lizzy, that's enough for today.
I think it was, Tatreez is always kind of this vehicle for um, telling personal stories and family stories. Women have it in their dowry usually. Like I know my grandmother has given me so many uh, tatreez and other kinds of fabric for my dowry since I was like maybe 10. She was like, yeah, this will be for when you get married. But it's very weird to think about it because when you're a kid, you're like, you don't really care about
Yeah, like
these
we
kinds
have
of pieces.
some things from like my great grandma, and like we're not allowed to touch it because it's like so precious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's like the only thing that they have like from like surviving the Armenian genocide. So it's like such a precious, like,
Right.
yeah, it's like, no, that has to stay in a box and we're not allowed to touch it, but we know it's there and it's, it's fine. And I guess it's like embroidery is like, there's a lot about care. Like, like men do it, but traditionally it's women and like our mothers and grandmothers, like it's this technique that's been passed down to women like over the generation, and like mothers are people who are supposed to care for us. And my mom, anyway, like I don't know about other people, but my mom always used to make me clothes, and she would like I did ballet for ages, and she would like put embroidery on my ballet bag and things like that. Like that's always like how, like one of the ways that she showed like love, like we're not like a super affectionate family, like we're not huggy and kissy, but we'll like make things for each other, which I think is really nice. I think it's harder. I've tried to learn other just from books, and like for me personally, I think it does really help if someone is sitting there and taking the time to show you. But it also, creates a relationship between you and that person.
Right.
Because you see the way that they work and how they do things. And like, I think like if you look at the like turn over like a traditional piece of like Tatreez, you can see how a woman thinks, like you can see where she skipped a stitch or how she's jumped, or like where she couldn't be bothered to cut her thread, or where she did, or if she was a perfectionist or not. Like you can learn a lot about it. Like once you understand how embroidery works, you can learn a lot about the woman who made it, like by looking at the piece.
That's actually also interesting. So do you consider that you develop a relationship with every person you get to embroider with?
I actually think I do, because it's such a personal thing and they're asking you questions. And you're helping them along the way. Like I tell people not to put too much pressure on themselves when they're starting, because obviously it's a whole new craft. And especially if you're an adult, like learning anything as an adult is so much more difficult than when you're learning it as a child. And if they don't have a pleasurable experience the first time, then they're unlikely to keep going. And I also remind people, so like someone told me once that in Persian carpets, they like make a mistake on purpose because no one is perfect except God. So I always tell people that it's okay to make mistakes, because it shows that, it's handmade and it's not made by a machine. And like the fact that something is made by hand, like it just makes it more special in my eyes anyway. I know like a lot of embroidery is done by machine now, and that's amazing, but I do always like love hand embroidery. But also just because like when like in the times I've taught people, like often people do like send me questions and send me pictures of their work. So it kind of just like proves to me like that we do have a relationship. Yeah, it's really nice. Like it just shows that it wasn't just like 2 hours on a Saturday. It's like taken on something else, and like they've gone and done their own things and like taken the time to research and like buy the materials and everything. Like especially like living somewhere in London where like 700 things are going on at once. Like it's really nice that people do that. Like for me, like we talk a little bit about the family photos, like because I was like so far away from like any of the people in those photos, it was just like stitching a relationship, like not just even from like past to present, but even with people that I didn't like, I knew like on a superficial level. Like I talked to them on the phone like once a week when I was really little, or I'd see them like once every like 3 or 4 years. Sometimes I think like a lot of the people in these photos have passed away now, so I'm always thinking like, would grandma even like this? I mean, I hope she would, but like I don't know. So it's kind of, yeah, it's a weird one. I think it's like paying homage and like just like being so far away from like where my mom and like where they grew up. It's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but it's trying to like understand that. Because like even if I go to Beirut now, it's like not the Beirut that my mom grew up in, and it never will be, you know? So
Right.
like no matter how much time I spend there, like so much has happened, you know, like just like over time in terms of like technology and like politically or whatever. So it's like literally like going back in time. Having mixed heritage, like it makes, like, I don't know, I'm always worried that I need to like keep something alive, like some part of the past, because maybe the next generation will be like even further away. And yeah, so I think for like a lot of diasporans, like we use like our heritage as what's the word? Like influences our artwork, which maybe people like in the country don't do as much, and like they don't like people who are not in diaspora maybe don't understand it as much. But I feel like it's for us a way to understand where we come from, even if it is a bit corny, like I don't know, but it's like a way to make sense of like why we are divorced from that place.
Yes, absolutely. You make sense, and it helps you knit also your very personal relationship with your roots and with your background and with the stories that you've heard and with your ancestors and with, you know, so many dimensions basically that you struggle to grasp when you're growing up completely disconnected from your roots basically.
Yeah, 100%. And like I grew up like in the suburbs of like Southwest London where like it's not very diverse. Like I never met anyone like me until like in the last 10 years, you know? So it's really like coming to terms and like just all this stuff that I've been exposed to like in the last few years, like and putting it all onto like the canvas.
Before we wrap up, I was also interested in knowing, so the art of embroidery, specifically in Palestine, was recognized by UNESCO as an important intangible cultural heritage, right? Is it the kind of form that is, do you think protecting this kind of practice is beneficial? And do you think also every specific embroidery technique or style should be protected, or do you think it will prevent it from evolving with its practitioners?
I think that it is incredibly beneficial because, I mean, specifically in the Palestinian context, like with everything that's going on and has gone on, it just, you know, it reinforces the fact that Palestinians have been on this land for centuries and that so has this art form. And I just think it's really important in that respect. But in terms of like every kind of embroidery being recognized, like, yeah, I do think that is a good thing. I don't know about in other parts of the world, but like when I went to school, we learned embroidery for like 5 weeks, maybe in art class. And then we moved on. Like none of my friends like know how to embroider unless I taught them. And I don't think they even know or are interested. And I actually grew up 10 minutes away from the Royal School of Needlework, which is kind of a weird thing to think about it. I haven't been there, but it just so happens that where I grew up, and also apparently I found this out recently that a road like round the corner from my childhood home, like French Huguenots from some time, I grew up near Hampton Court Palace, so sometime in like the Tudor period, there were a lot of embroiderers near where I grew up. But I literally only found that out like a few weeks ago, and I'm like 30 years old. So that is crazy to me. I think that it is nice, like, to recognize these traditional art forms, because if we don't recognize it, how will people know? Like the fact that I come from this place that has a lot of textile history and didn't know is kind of insane to me. And I do think that it's fine to recognize the history. Like you talk about Palestine and traditional Palestinian embroidery. And yes, there are a lot of people who only do traditional Tatreez, but there are a lot of amazing, incredible Palestinian artists like Sama Hijazi or Jordan Nassar who use traditional embroidery and they put it into like a much more contemporary context while still honoring the past. So I think it's fine. In fact, like by recognizing it, it brings more people like awareness to that and gives them the opportunity to interpret that in their own way.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to also mention the artist names so that everyone can find them and look at their work. So I guess they are probably some of the artists that inspire you, despite you having your personal interpretation of Tatreez and not working with traditional style.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like, I love looking at traditional things because everything has to come from somewhere. And like the people before us, like, laid the groundwork for us to like move it in a new direction.
Thank you so much, Lizzy, for your time. If anyone wants to find you online, it's through your website, lizzyvartanian.com, right? Or through your Instagram account, where we can see your absolutely gorgeous portrait embroideries and other works.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun, and I'm really honored that you wanted to spend this time learning about my work.
I'm very happy we got to share this little moment and spread the word about embroidery.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.